Hi, this is Irv Shapiro with the MakeWithTech channel. And I haven't made a video in over 2 weeks. But I have a good excuse. I've been thinking about Thingiverse. And I've been doing more than thinking about Thingiverse. You see, my background over the last 40 years is when I was back in the corporate world prior to becoming a YouTube creator. I built software companies, software technology companies, and I packaged them and I sold them. I did that 3 times. So I know a little bit about what it takes to build and operate a software-based business. Let's say a business like Thingiverse. Many of us in the creator, maker, 3D printing world have a love-hate relationship with Thingiverse. For the last 4 years or so, it's generally the first place I go to look for a model I want to print. Unfortunately, all too often, my experience is disappointing. And the performance of the site is slow, or maybe doesn't work at all. But then I remember the joy I felt when I discovered the possibilities of Customizer. And then Thingiverse basically took it all away because for a very long time now, Customizer doesn't seem to even work at all. That gave me an opportunity to do a video on how to use OpenSCAD on models you downloaded from Thingiverse, but wasn't quite satisfying. So in this video, I'm going to look at 3 things. You're going to want to watch the whole video to learn about all 3 of those. First, I'm going to ask what's wrong with Thingiverse. We're going to look at the history of Thingiverse, and I'm going to speculate on what's happening there. Second, we're going to look at 7 alternatives to Thingiverse. There are many more than 7. There must be over 20. We're going to look at 7 of them, and I'm going to share my observations about those alternatives. Then we're going to have some fun. Then I'm going to share with you a vision very loosely, very early, that I have for what a new type of alternative to Thingiverse might look like, because I'm interested in your comments. I'm interested in learning what you think about the need for something new and different for folks that have 3D printers at home or in their small businesses and are looking for models. So stay tuned and let's learn something together. Now, before I ask the question, what's wrong with Thingiverse, I want to introduce those of you that might be new to this channel to MakeWithTech. Here at MakeWithTech, we help people learn how to use desktop technology, 3D printers, electronics, a little bit of software, a little bit of woodworking, various crafting techniques. We teach people how to use these things to make things, to create, to innovate. So we have close to 200 videos on the channel already, and generally we publish every week or so. As I said, it's been a bit of a gap because I'm thinking about Thingiverse, and I'll explain why that took some time a little bit later. But if you want to catch all these videos, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, and as always, feel free to share any of these videos. They're completely free on any social media, anywhere you'd like. Now, let's look at the history of Thingiverse and then talk about my speculation about what's going wrong. Thingiverse was founded in 2008 by Zach Smith. Zach Smith is also one of the founders of MakerBot. MakerBot being a remarkable company that really introduced the consumer and educational world to the power of 3D printing. Then in 2013, everything's changed. MakerBot was acquired by Stratasys. Stratasys is a successful, one of the leaders of industrial 3D printing. 3D printing for doctors' offices, for dentists' offices, for manufacturing, 3D printing for architects making models. They're in a variety of industries. and they're a big business with over $500 million, over $500 million of revenue last year. Now, Thingiverse is by far the most successful online site that catalogs and distributes models for people using 3D printers. Let me share with you some information about Thingiverse. And this information comes from mysite.info. They estimate that Thingiverse has over 17 million visitors a month, and that they generate over 200,000, 228,000 to be exact, dollars of revenue per month on the ads they run. That means they're approaching $3 million of revenue a year. Now, to you and I, that might be an okay business, a pretty good business. And how much does it really take to keep Thingiverse up and running? There's really no direct consumer engagement there. But in spite of that, Thingiverse feels like a neglected child. It feels like Stratasys doesn't quite know what to do with it. Because there's such passion in the hobbyist and educational space for Thingiverse, it seems like they don't want to shut it down, but they don't want to pay a lot of attention to it. Now, recently, over the last year or so, they have done a facelift, and they've improved their performance a bit, but key features such as the customizer don't work. I just went to try the customizer again this week, and I saw that a model I had submitted for customization 9 months ago was still in the queue. It's broken. Just a few weeks ago, many of us saw announcements in the industry, in the space, on the internet, that Thingiverse had been hacked. Now, in and of itself, that's not a terrible thing. It's really hard to secure sites, and there is no credit card information on Thingiverse. So what did they get? Maybe some email address and other things. But what's upsetting is Thingiverse didn't come out and take responsibility. They didn't announce this. They declined to really provide any true information. So what we heard about this was all secondhand. And unfortunately, whether it's a good practice or bad, many of us do use the same password on multiple sites. So if the hack included usernames and passwords, that's of some concern. So the question we're going to explore a bit more in this video today, is it time for us to leave Thingiverse, to go somewhere else, and what are those alternatives? Now we're going to look at 7, really 8 alternatives here. If you look at this slide, the two sites on the top, CGTrader and Happy 3D, are commercially focused sites. They have different goals, and we're going to look at that. But they're in the business of making money by selling models. If you go to the green section in the middle, you'll see two sites, Cults 3D and MyMiniFactory, that are also in the business of selling models. But if you go look at those sites, there's a lot of ads on those sites. They're also attempting to capture eyeballs and make money on advertising. And it just has the feel, because they keep changing where they place ads, how they run ads, that they're struggling a bit to find the right revenue model. Now, there's a reason for that. I took the data from MyMiniFactory that I could find online and the data from Thingiverse. And I looked at estimates that I obtained online for their revenue specifically from ads. And what I found was that for these sites, for both of them, it's interesting, the number came up almost exactly the same. They generate about 12 cents per model per month of revenue. So if they want to build a viable business, they need a lot of models. Thingiverse is way ahead in that area with close to 2 million models, so they clearly make the most money from advertising. And so the game, if you're attempting to compete with Thingiverse on an ad basis, is to get as many models as possible. So both Cults 3D and MyMiniFactory also offer paid models. And a model might sell for a couple dollars or $10, $15, $20, maybe more. Prices are set by the designers, and a cut goes to the designer and a cut goes to the site. It does seem they're both struggling with that model. We'll see that MyMiniFactory has a unique twist on that when we look at the site. The next list of sites in blue are vendor-provided sites. The goal of those sites is to get people to think about their printers. And yes, they have models that you can print on any 3D printer. You don't have to use a model from the Prusa site on a Prusa printer or a model from the Creality site on a Creality printer. But their motivation as a site sponsored by a vendor is to have you think about their printer. And these three sites actually have the best performance. They seem to do the best job of delivering a consistent product. They have fewer models, but the performance of the sites are better. And the last site listed here is very different. It's a site designed to help you learn to use script-based computer-aided design. That's where you write something like a programming language in order to design a model. We're going to look at that a little bit later. And if you're interested in things like OpenSCAD, I recommend you take a look at cadhub.xyz. Now, let's look at these sites together. We're going to begin on the CGTrader site. CGTrader is clearly a very professional business. If I recall correctly, it has outside funding. I believe it's venture funding. And their initial business, which has evolved, was to create a place for designers to sell 3D models used in games, for catalogs, in commercial image work. So it wasn't really focused on people looking for things to 3D print. And that has a side effect we'll see in a moment. If you see here on the front page, here's a beautiful image, 3D image of a chair that you might see in a catalog online. As we scroll down the site, you'll see they have specific services for businesses where they'll come into your business and they'll help you digitize items so you can show them as part of an online catalog. They also have a division of the company that sells software to integrate with online catalogs. If we do continue down, you will see they do sell models, including models for 3D printing. So let's go to the search box here that says there are over 1.3 million 3D models. And let's type in shelf bracket. And we'll just see what comes up. And there are a lot of models that came up, and the performance of this site is excellent. So let's go to one of these shelf brackets. And you'll see this shelf bracket has a picture of it in a slicer. So it's clearly optimized for 3D printing. And for $7, I can buy this bracket. I think this is a very good site for practical items. Now, let's look at another very practical site called Happy 3D. Happy 3D is a site where you can buy replacement parts for various appliances. And I think this is the future of a lot of 3D printing. I think manufacturers aren't going to stock spare parts anymore. They're going to stock plans. And they'll either 3D print them on demand for you, or you'll print them yourself. Unfortunately, this site is very limited, and there are just not a lot of models yet. But I think it's an interesting site to think about. Now, let's go to Cults. Cults is a site with also a large number of models, both free and paid. And they have a fair amount of advertising on the site. Now, let me put in the same search I've put in on the other sites, shelf bracket. And let's see what comes up. And not very many practical prints here. So, as in many of these sites, if we go back to the home page, let's clear this search and go back to the front here, you'll see they have lots of fun things, of cute things, of figurines, but it appears there are just not a lot of practical prints. So CGTrader seemed to have the majority of the practical prints we've seen so far. Let's look at another site, MyMiniFactory. And MyMiniFactory is doing some interesting experiments in monetization. If you look at the site, you'll see there are ads right on the homepage, including a lot of ads for MyMiniFactory. Many of the models are for the gaming community, where people use these as part of gameplay or various props for gameplay. And they've done something very interesting here. They've created the idea of tribes. A tribe is basically a creator, a designer who has a series of models, and you pay them a certain amount of subscription money per month. So they're looking for a way to both support designers and their business in addition to the actual sale of models. So let's look here for shelf brackets. And there are 4 premium models and 64 free models. We can go to one of these free models. And the performance here was pretty good. Ads popping up once again, pretty much all over the place. So it's a bit of a busy site. Does seem to be a good alternative for some of these practical models, but maybe we could do better. Now, let's go to one of the manufacturer sites. We'll start with Prusa. Just as everything Prusa does, it's well done. Now, Prusa printers may be on the high end of your budget, but this site seems to have a very nice selection of models. And if I search for shelf brackets, I get some very nice selections. Okay, here you'll see a shelf bracket that came up in our search. And you'll notice here there's a printer model listed that indicates that you can download the either raw model and slice it yourself, or there might be a pre-sliced model. Now, I'm not a fan of pre-sliced models because, as I've shared in this video and others, every printer is a little different. I think you have to tune your models. But if we go here to download, you'll see there are both options. And you'll find on this site that many of the pre-sliced models are not for pre-sliced just for Prusa printers. I've seen models here for Creality printers also. So this is actually quite an interesting alternative. Prusa's doing a very, very good job here. Let's look at some others. The next one is Creality. The Creality Cloud is really part of an ecosystem where Creality is trying to make it easier to print to your 3D printer right from your phone, from your smartphone. And so the model repository is part of that. Once again, a lot of gaming and figurine models. Let's search for shelf bracket. And not very much comes up here. Well, when Creality first offered this site, it appeared into the market with thousands of models right away. Question is, where'd they get those? Well, if you looked at a lot of them, they were just scraped right off of the Thingiverse site. Created a lot of concern in the community about intellectual property rights and whether that was the right thing to do. Well, Creality has clamped down on this issue. And if you had signed up for the site, registered, uploaded a model, you'll see that Creality now requires you to identify the ownership of the model. And if you're sharing the model, not just printing it for yourself, you have to select a Creative Commons license for the model. And they've indicated they'll take all models that are not properly licensed off the site. So the number of models on the Creality site recently has gone down. Let's look at one more vendor site. That's the IdeaMaker site. This is a very clean, very simple site. They have one very nice feature. They have a 3D viewing environment that's extremely well done. Unfortunately, they have a limited number of models. Many of those models are add-ons for IdeaMaker printers. So we'll see there are 22 shelf brackets listed here. Not really very much variety. Here's one that's a bit interesting. And it's a simple site, but because it just doesn't have a lot of models, it may not be what we're looking for. What's the commonality across these sites? Well, a lot of 3D characters, not a lot of practical prints, not boxes and dividers for the drawers in my office, for shelf brackets, for replacement parts. There are sites that have those, but nobody's really nailed that piece of the marketplace. The closest one is Thingiverse, and that's just because they have so many models, they cover everything. Number two, there are limited customization options. To have a shelf bracket just the right size for that custom shelf I'm putting up in my child's room, there'd have to be hundreds of shelf brackets. Now I can scale a bracket up or down, but then it really changes in both directions. If I don't scale it uniformly, the holes for the screws won't be round anymore. I'd like to have more customization option. And it's clear everyone's struggling with a revenue model. So let's look at an alternative. And to do that, let's first look at OpenSCAD. So here's a model I built. We can actually go over here and see the code that I wrote for this model. And that code is unimportant because in this new model environment that I'm thinking about, the end user would never see that code. They would see an image on the screen that looks like this. They'd have the ability to move the image around, to rotate it, to look at it from different angles. They'd also have the ability to change the model. So if I change this from a width of 60 millimeters to a width of 30, I have a narrower shelf bracket. They'd have the ability to size it for different size shelves. Well, let's say we move this down to 100 millimeters. And then we can make the sidewall also much smaller. They'd have the ability to change the size of the screw holes. Let me show you one more example so you can see the power of this type of environment. Okay, here on the screen we see a box. Now I can make the box higher by changing this over here. So I could measure that drawer in the kitchen that has all this junk, decide I'm going to make boxes to fit in there. So let me move this back down a little bit to make it a little easier to see. But I also could divide the box into multiple sections. So we can see here we have dividers. I could make the section dividers higher. Let's make them 26. Now they're higher. I could add section dividers in the other direction. Maybe I want a box for earrings. So you see here with one model, I have hundreds of possibilities. So imagine all of the practical things you need at home that you'd like to 3D print, and all of those are available online and you can customize them. That's the vision I have. Let's look at a slide together. So this site would emphasize practical print. There'd be many less models, maybe just thousands of models, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, because each one could be customized in many, many different ways. Initially, we would emphasize OpenSCAD, because if you Google the various CAD scripting languages, it has the vast majority of the marketplace. It's a mature product. We know the environment will work. We'd have strong IP protection, intellectual property protection, because we would protect the scripts. So if a designer uploads a script, it's only the customized models that people would be able to download. Now, we could sell models one at a time, but I think a more sustainable business model to pay for all the development time and the support and the hosting that's going to be required here would be to sell subscriptions. Maybe you can try it out for a certain number of months, but you sign up for an annual subscription. Perhaps it's an annual subscription that you can actually cancel at any time, but it still gives you an incentive to sign up for a longer period of time. Another alternative is that single downloaded models might be very expensive. Maybe that shelf bracket would be 15 bucks if you only want to pay for the bracket, but it would be 2 bucks out of your annual subscription allocation. We'd have mechanisms for paying designers a portion of the fees collected by the site, so we can both support the site and support the designers. And maybe to cover the costs of building the site, which would be hundreds or thousands of hours of development time, we use a Kickstarter campaign. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, should we stay with Thingiverse? If we don't, are the existing sites what we need? Or are the existing sites great for gamers and desktop characters, but maybe for practical prints, we need something new? CGTrader is a very professional site for practical prints, but it doesn't really support customization. So do we need something new? Well, folks, I hope you found this discussion interesting. I'm really interested in your comments, either below here on YouTube or go to forum.makewithtech.com, where there's a discussion group I'm sponsoring where at no cost to you, you can participate in this discussion. Please subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, share this video with lots of people who might be interested in this discussion, and don't forget, let's continue to learn things together.